Tov, let us start today's daf yomi. We're going to start on the bottom of Yud Zayin on the Aleph of 17a. Excuse me, the top of 17a, 9 lines from the top that we learned in our Mishnah. Echad Omer b'fanai nechtav. If one person says, if one person who brings the get says it was written before me, Mishnayim Omer b'faneinu nechtav, and two people say it was signed before me, then we're going to say under those circumstances, we're going to say it was kosher. So Amar Rabbi Yami, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, when our Mishnah says that if two people sign it, and one person says, b'fanai nechtav, that is kosher, lo shanu el shaget yotzei mitachas yad ksiva. When we say it's kosher under those circumstances, that's only when the agent who was appointed to bring the get was the one who says it was signed in front of me. Because that person, the rabbi, is made by the takana, and if an agent brings it and he says it was written before me, it's as though he's considered to be like two people. So therefore we have two people on the ksiva, two people on the writing. So dinasu kishnayim alzeh, ukishnayim alzeh, and there's also like two people on the signature. But if the agents who are bringing it were the witnesses for the signing, then we're going to say possible that the get is not kosher because we don't have the one who says he saw it written wasn't an agent, and so therefore we only have one witness on the writing because he's not included under the rubric of the takanas of the chachamim. So therefore you need to have the two people who saw the signing combined with the now equivalent two people on the writing, because that agent has become the equivalent of two. Alma Kasavar, we see from here that Rabbi Yochanan is of the opinion that Shnayim Aviu Sheviu get Medina Sayam Tzrichin Sheyomer B'Faneinu Nechtav B'Faneinu Nechtam. We see from here that even though two people have brought the get from Medina Sayam, like here we have three people bringing it. But we see for sure that if you have two people bringing it, they still have to say they still have to say that it was written in front of me to make sure that we have it lishma. This is like the position of Rabbah, to make sure it was done lishma. Because otherwise we wouldn't care if the person who says it was written in front of me was an agent or not. We have two other people bringing it. So you see that's the position of Rabbi Yochanan. So it says Rabbi Yasi, when he hears his teaching of Rabbi Yochanan, Amrullah Rabbi Yasi says to him, well, if that's the case, Almiata, what about the first clause of our Mishnah, where it states, Reisha, Dikotani Shnaim Omer B'Faneinu Nechtav, Ve'echad Omer B'Fanei Nechtam Pasol, that it says in the Reisha of our Mishnah that if two people say it was written in front of me, and one says it was signed in front of me, it's disqualified, even though two of them brought it. Rabbi Yehuda Machshir, Rabbi Yehuda says under those cases, it's going to be kosher. And Rabbi Yehuda says under that case, it's kosher. You mean to say that even though the two people who brought the ksiva, who brought the document where the witnesses on the ksiva, the get is still going to be disqualified because they weren't the agents for the signing, and so therefore the Rabbanan are going to say it's posel under those circumstances. And what's the reason why the Rabbanan are going to say it's posel? Because they require b'fanei nechtam, and he can't say it. The second person can't say it because he wasn't appointed an agent, and so therefore we see from even in this case also the Chachamim are going to disqualify the get. So the Gemara says that what happened was Zimnin Ashkechei. One time Zimnin Ashkechei. Another time Rabbi Asi found Rabbi Ami. The Yasivika Amar. Another time Rabbi Asi found Zimnin Ashkechei. Another time Rabbi Asi found Rabbi Ami the Yasivika Amar. So this teaching was previously a teaching of Rabbi Ami in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. So another time Rabbi Asi found Rabbi Ami that was sitting and saying, I feel get yotze mitachas idei edi chasima kosher. That in this case, and what did he say? He said even if the two witnesses who brought it in a circumstance where there were three people bringing the get, and he says in the case where one was the witness on the ksiva, one says it was written before me, and two say it was signed in front of me. He says even if the two witnesses who signed it were the ones who were the agents, whereas the one on the ksiva was not the agent, we're still going to say it's kosher. And why is he going to say it's kosher? He's going to say because Alma must be kasavar. It must be that from the fact that it says that we don't need the testimony on the writing, because nevertheless, it's going to say it's kosher because we say Shnaim she'ovil get medina sayam ain't srichan sheyomer fanei nechtam. They don't actually have to say it. It must be that he's pasking really like Rabbi says it's only about kiyum shtaros. We don't need to say that it was written in front of me at the end of the day. We just need to say it was signed in front of me. So I'm really Rabbi Asi al me'ata, but in the first clause it says Rabbi Asi to Rabbi Ami Reishi de Katani, but in the first clause it says Shnayim Omer Fanenu Nefta ve'Echad Omer Fanenu Nefta Pasol Rabbi Yehuda Ma'achshir. In that case, where two people say it was written, and one of the people, another person says it was signed in front of me, it's disqualified. Rabbi Yehuda Ma'achshir. Rabbi Yehuda says, okay, what's the reason under these circumstances that the Chachamim say it's possible? What's the reasoning? Because they ain't get yotzim mitachas yedei shneim, because the two people who say it was right in front of me, they weren't the agents on it. Get yotzim mitachas yedei shneim. But if they get what if they would have been the agents on it, machshari rabbanan, then the rabbanan would say it's actually okay under those circumstances. And Amrulay in, and he says that is the case. So he says that is the case indeed, that if the two people who were the agents on the writing, they said we were the agents, so the rabbis would say it is okay. So, but another time you told us it's not the case, that even if the two agents that we would say in that case that it was disqualified. But you didn't tell us that before. So Amalei Yasari Shalotimot. He says this is a peg. This latter phrase, this is a peg that's the truth, and it can't be changed. Meaning to say that this final expression that I said to you, that in case where the get is brought by both of these agents on the ksiva, that it's going to be kosher. That's the truth, and don't depart from it. Okay, so now we're going to go on to the next mission. The next mission is going to talk about why do we need the zman, the time, the date in the document. So the Mishnah tells us, Nichtav Bayom, if the get was written during the day, B'nichtam Bayom, and was signed that same day, or Bayom, or B'layla, B'nichtam B'layla, if it was written during the day and signed that night, or B'layla, B'nichtam Bayom, or was written at night and signed the next day. All these are it's the same day, because the night of the day, the day follows the night in Jewish law, that it's all part of the same concept called a day. So under all those circumstances, we're going to say that the get is kosher, because the time and the date reflect the same date. But let's say it was written by day and signed that night, it's disqualified. Rabbi Shimon Machshir, but under those circumstances, Rabbi Shimon says it is kosher. So Rabbi Shimon says even if the get was written one day and signed the next night, and signed that night, it's still kosher. Now this get, Rashi tells us, this get is called a get muktamhu. It's a predated, or it's a get which is written early, meaning to say she has this document. She really gets, so it was written during the day, but it was signed at night. So meaning to say the get says that she was divorced on Sunday, but she really only got divorced on Monday. So the date does not reflect the actual time of the divorce. The get says she was divorced, but the get says she was divorced after she was actually already divorced. Excuse me. The get says she was divorced when she was still actually married, because it says she was divorced on Sunday, but she was actually only divorced on Monday. So Rabbi Shimon is not concerned about it. Rabbi Shimon says she's kosher. So Rabbi Shimon says it's kosher under those circumstances. Because Rabbi Shimon says, all all the Gittin which were written during the day and signed at night are actually disqualified, meaning to say, here the word get does not mean a divorce, and here the word get just means irregular contracts. All the contracts where it says the event took place prior to it actually taking place, in those cases, the contracts are disqualified because they don't reflect the reality. And what's going to happen, Rashi says, is people are going to seize money from the date where it says that this, let's say it was a sale, took place. And so there's a lien on that property, but the reality is the actual sale didn't happen until the next day. And so therefore you're going to take from the purchasers from the day that it was written, and you're going to end up taking the money improperly. But Rabbi Shimon says it's okay, chutz mikitei nashim, with the exception of the case of the bill of divorce. That Rabbi Shimon allows you to have a get mukdam, to have the date written that they got divorced on Sunday, when really they only got divorced on Monday. In the case of somebody selling a property, he says, or I'm lending you this money on Sunday, but really I only lent you the money on Monday. So if I'm lending you the money on Sunday, then I have a lien on all your property starting from Sunday. And if you went out and sold something, and if the document says that the lien starts Sunday and you stole something Sunday afternoon, then I have recourse to it. But it's not accurate if really the loan only happened on Monday, so then I wouldn't have had recourse to your loan. So therefore, Rabbi Shimon says by regular contract we need to know. But again, Rabbi Shimon says we don't need to know. The Gemara is going to explain why. So the Gemara says, Itmar, why do they require a date, a time in a get? Why is it required? So Rabbi Yochanan says, Mishum bas achoso. Rabbi Yochanan says we're talking about a case where you marry your niece, the daughter of your sister, which the Gemara Yevamos says it's preferable. Today it's not common, although there was somebody when I was Rabbi of Oev, there was somebody there who married his niece, but it's not common. So therefore, what the concern is, we don't want him to have too much compassion on her. So if there's no date in the document, what's going to happen, and then she commits adultery, we can't establish that she was married at that time, and she just produces the bill of divorce and so she says, I was divorced at that time. But now that there's a date on it, if we say she had adultery on Sunday, but the divorce, if we say she had adultery on Monday and the divorce shows that the date on the divorce shows that it was on a Sunday, clearly it's not adultery, and so she's okay. So that's why we need the date, so she can't claim she was divorced when she really wasn't divorced. And we're concerned that he's going to have too much compassion on her. So that's what Rashi says. He's going to have compassion on her. He doesn't want her to get the punishment. So therefore, he writes her a get without a date and gives it to her. And then she's going to stand in the court. She's going to take out the get and she'll say, listen, I was divorced then. And I wasn't married, so I was allowed to be with that man. Reish Lakish says, Mishum Perush. Reish Lakish says, no, the concern is we need to know from the time of the gate, from the time of the get, at that point on, the husband no longer has the right to the fruits of her property. She has a property which produces fruits. The husband has a right to nichsei malug, to the pluckings of the property while they're still married. So let's say she has a get, and he could still be selling her fruits because he says, that I was selling the fruits, and the get came afterwards. So therefore, we have to have a date in the get so that he stops selling the fruits from that point on. So then she can collect them if he sells it after the date of the get. If there won't be a date of the get on it, he'll sell it. And when she comes to try and claim it in the court, she'll have the lower hand because he'll say to her, no, I sold it before the divorce. So therefore, Reish Lakish says we need a date to protect the wife's property. Reish Lakish, my time will Rabbi Yochanan. Why doesn't Reish Lakish adopt the concern of Rabbi Yochanan that we're concerned that she'll get away with adultery if there's no date in the calendar? Amrocha, I'll say to you, Znus lo shlicha. Reish Lakish doesn't adopt the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan because he says Znus adultery is not common. Now, that's not really the case. Adultery is common. We know that there are a lot of Gemaras just talking about adultery. So Tosfos says, no, adultery is common, but the adultery with witnesses and warning, where you're going to actually be about to execute them, that's not so common. So that's what Tosfos says, because the Gemara in Suba says that they actually instituted that she gets married on a Wednesday so that they can go to court because of the concern of adultery. So we say, yeah, adultery is more common, but adultery being executed, where the person is about to be executed, that's not common. And so therefore, we're not going to institute a date just for that point. Rabbi Yochanan, my time alone, Rish Lakish. Why doesn't Rabbi Yochanan adopt Rish Lakish's logic? Because Savar Yesh Shabal Peros Ad Shas Nasina. Because Rish Lakish says, my time alone, Rish Lakish. So the reason why Rabbi Yochanan doesn't hold like Rish Lakish, because Rabbi Yochanan is of the position that the husband actually still gets the fruits, the produce of the marriage all the way up until the time of the giving of the get. So therefore, the time of the get doesn't help, because when she comes to claim that he stole her property, he sold her fruits, she needs to produce witnesses when it was given, not when it was written. And so therefore, the time on the get is not going to help, says Rabbi Yochanan. Bishlam Rish Lakish Misham Hachi Kamachshir. So the Gemara says it makes sense to me why Rish Lakish says Misham Hachi Kamachshir Rabbi Shimon. It makes sense to me why Rish Lakish says that Rabbi Shimon says that if the get was written earlier, it's going to be okay. Because Rabbi Shimon is going to be in the position, Rashi points out, that once he decides to divorce her, he has no fruits anymore. He loses his rights to the fruits from the moment he decides to divorce her. And so therefore, if she's going to come to make a claim against the fruits of the husband, the people he sold the fruits to, and he's going to make the claim from the time when it was written, she's making a good claim, because even though he didn't give it to her, from the time he writes the divorce, he's intending to divorce her. And so therefore, he loses the rights to her fruits. So therefore, Rabbi Shimon would say it's kosher from that point on. Now, Rabbi Yochanan, my time, but what's the core reasoning according to Rabbi Yochanan to Rabbi Shimon Machshir? Remember, Rabbi Yochanan says that we're concerned. Again, mukdam, an earlier get is no good because we're concerned that maybe he's going to have compassion on her. So what's the reason why Rabbi Yochanan says it's okay? Rabbi Yochanan, I'll leave it to Rabbi Shimon will come in. He said, no, and I said the reasoning is because he might have compassion on his niece. I wasn't talking about Rabbi Shimon. I wasn't saying my logic according to Rabbi Shimon. Ki kamina liba de Rabbanan. I was saying according to the Rabbanan, because according to Rabbi Shimon, for sure, Rabbi Yochanan would say it's not because of the niece, but because of the peiros. And so therefore, Rabbi Shimon says the whole reason why you need date is because of the peiros, and therefore, from the time of the writing, he already loses the rights to the fruits, even though he didn't give it to her. So Bishlam Rabbi Yochanan, Hainu Deika Ben Rabbi Shimon Rabbanan. So it makes sense according to Rabbi Yochanan, who says that the Rabbanan say that the concern is Bachal Choso, and Rabbi Shimon says it's because of fruits. Well, that's why there's a distinction between the Rabbi Shimon and the Rabbanan. That's why they're arguing. That's why the Rabbanan say an earlier get is disqualified, because they're concerned about Shem Yechava, that you might have mercy or compassion on your niece. And Rabbi Shimon says it's kosher because he says the whole reason why they put the date in is because of the peiros. And so therefore an earlier get is kosher, because if she wants to come because if she wants to come and take it from the time of the writing, she's correct in taking the money from that point, because he had to decide to divorce her. But according to Reish Lakish, according to Reish Lakish, what's the distinction between Rabbi Shimon and the Rabbanan? So, meaning say, why are Rabbi Shimon and Rabbanan arguing? According to Reish Lakish, it's both because, according to both of them, why do the Rabbanan say it's disqualified? She's correct in why the Rabbanan saying it's disqualified? Because she's correct in taking it before the. Why the Rabbanan say in such a case that it's disqualified under those circumstances? She's correct in taking it earlier, in taking it before the get was actually given. just like Rabbi Shimon is machshir to get early because he says he has no point to sell at that point. So too, the Rabbanan should also say an earlier get is kosher at that point. So the Gemara says, hold on one second. According to Reish Lakish, why is the get muktam a problem according to the Rabbanan? So the Gemara says, because that's actually the argument. The argument is those fruits that the husband eats from the time of when the get was written until the get was signed. Because the Rabbanan say, the Rabbanan say she can only claim this fruits that her husband took from her from the time where the get was signed. So therefore, prior to that, the get is disqualified. If a get is muktam, it's disqualified because when she comes to say, listen, I want to take back my fruits, it was just written, then she doesn't get it. Whereas the Rabbi Shimon says that from the moment it was muktam, she can claim the fruits and therefore it's kosher. So Gemara says, but didn't we hear just the opposite? Didn't we learn when can you come and when can we come and take the fruits away from the person who bought them? Rabbi Yochanan says Mishas Kasiva. Rabbi Yochanan says from the time where the get was written. And Reish Lakish says Mishas Nesina. Reish Lakish says from the time when the get was given. So this is the opposite, because Rabbi Yochanan is saying that was from the moment when he wrote the get, which is not consistent with the Rabbanan. It's consistent with Rabbi Shimon. And Reish Lakish says it's only when it was given, only when she gave the get into her hand. So Epoch. So the Gemara says, okay, we have to switch these positions in this statement. And we say Rabbi Yochanan says that she could take the peiros from the time when it was given, only according to the Rabbanan. Reish Lakish says only from the time that it was written. So the Gemara says, Amalei Abaye or Rabbi Yosef. Abaye says to Rabbi Yosef, Abaye is going to challenge us. He says, Gimel Gittin Psulim. We have a concept that there is this Mishnah, which we're going to get to later on, that says it in Gittin, that there are 3 gets that are disqualified. Vim Nises, and if amongst these 3 gets, if she got married with one of these 3 disqualified gets, the offspring is kosher, avlad kosher. And so if that's the case, if we're saying that nonetheless, even though she got married to one of these gets, the vlad is kosher, the offspring is kosher, and one of these 3 gets is this case which there are witnesses on it, but there is no date on it. So that's Rashi says that we don't really need the date that the offspring is kosher. If that's the case, how do the Chachamim, what does this takana accomplish if the get is kosher even without the witnesses? B'di'evet. Where it says, well, it helps because she's not allowed to do this. She's not allowed to get married with such a get. So because a woman who got get with a get without a date, she can't get married. And so therefore, look at Rashi says, since that's the case, he get below his man. If he wants to write a get without a date, to have compassion on his niece, or because he desires to sell the fruits. Well, the judges, the scribes will not write the get, and the witnesses won't sign it. So therefore, this is a good preventive technique. So the Gemara says, but he has a different technique of what he could do. Gazio is man day. Yeah, even anyway. But guess what? He could always cut out the date and then give the date to his wife without a get on it. And so therefore, if he does that, if she has adultery, she could get away with it. And also, at that point, if he cuts off the date, he could have sold the fruits earlier and gotten away with it. So the Gemara says, Amarle, so the Gemara says, we can't make these takanos to protect against deceptive people, because that's like a forgery. We can't do that. All we can do is work with honest people. And so therefore, this will prevent 99% of the cases. So the Gemara says, well, then Abaye asks another question. Abaye asked Rav Yosef, let's say the time that's written in it, Kasubo, the time that's written in it is Shavua. So fine, we understand that what's the time that's written in the get? That's the year of the sabbatical year, meaning to say the number of the sabbatical year in this Jubilee year. Let's say the Jubilee year is 49 years, 50th year is the Jubilee year. So this is the third sabbatical year of the Jubilee year. But you don't put in the exact year of the sabbatical year, or you write in just the Shana, or you just write the Chodesh or the Shabbat, Mai. Under all of these circumstances, you just write the year of the sabbatical year, or you just write the year, but you don't say which month. You write the month, but you don't just say the week, or you write the week, but you don't say anything more. What would be the case? Would it be kosher? So the Gemara says, Amrulay kosher. So Rav Yosef says it's kosher under those circumstances, where the date is not as specific as we would like. So the Gemara says, well, if that's the case, so since the date is not specific, how does the takana helping? So the Gemara says, so the Chachamim, so Rav Yosef responds, or the Gemara responds, it helps if the witnesses will come and say that she committed adultery in the sabbatical year before this sabbatical year, which means that she clearly committed the adultery. It was before the get, or if the husband will sell the fruits after the sabbatical year. So he clearly stole the fruits under those circumstances. So it does help. It's not a complete help. It does have a partial help. Because if we're not going to say that the get that has a date that's not as precise as we want is not going to be acceptable, Yoma Gufe Miyadinan. The actual, even if you put in, well, she was divorced on June 3rd, it doesn't help us because Miyadinan Imitzafar Mipanya. We don't know if she was divorced in the morning, in which case he can't sell the fruits in the afternoon, or if she was divorced in the evening, in which case she might have had adultery that morning. El Yoma the Kamei Yoma the Basre. The date only helps us for the day before to say that if she committed adultery, then she'd be a problem, or the day after to say you can't sell the fruits. Achanami, so too, Ahani was shvur the Kamal, shvur the Basre. So here too, it helps only for it still helps for the sabbatical year before, the sabbatical year after, even though it's not foolproof. Here we'll stop here. The recording will continue this obviously on Shabbos Kodesh. I'm going to say